Oh my God. I was really hoping I wouldn't have to do this. A video explaining what lag compensation is. I was trying to avoid it for so long, but I just can't because there's so many stupid things I read. I frequently go to these forums here, the Activision Call of Duty Black Ops 2 forums, and I see all sorts of stupid things that are said by stupid people. Like this one. Check this out. It's the connection. Lag comp only exists to punish those with good connections. A good way to test if you're getting screwed by lag comp or the host connection is to go into combat training and fight the bots on hard or veteran. If you go do their well and get crushed in the pubs, it's probably lag comp. He's referring to this other guy who's had some other problems. But the point is, it's not lag comp. Lag compensation is not bad. It's not at all bad. It's actually really, really good. And without lag comp, we'd have lag shooting. And if anybody who's ever played Modern Warfare World at War on Wii, or sorry, Call of Duty World at War, or Call of Duty Reflex on the Wii will know that lag shooting is disgusting. It's horrible, and you don't want it. And that's why lag shooting exists. Lag compensation exists. And today I'm here to explain to you why it's actually a good thing and how it actually works. Now I know you guys have probably heard a billion other people talk about it, but it seems like a lot of the big YouTubers out there don't actually know what it is, or they don't actually know how it works. And so finally, you're going to hear it from the smart person, me. And yeah, I don't mean to sound arrogant, but I've looked into it, I've read it, and I know what it is. And here's what I'm talking about. This is an article. This is the article I've read. It's by it's developer.valvesoft.com. In other words, it's made by the guys that actually create Counter-Strike, and they talk here about what lag compensation is. And it gets a little technical. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to actually talk like about what it is in a simple way so that you guys can understand. Okay, let's get started. First off, we're going to start with 2 points. Okay, there's going to be you, assuming you're not the host in the game, and there's going to be the host, and he's going to be over here. Okay, cool. Now, what happens is on your screen, you're playing a game, and it's all good. You see your screen like this, and you see an enemy on the screen. Okay, whatever. I'm not the best drawer in the world. And you chuck your reticule or your sniper scope or whatever over him, and you shoot. Okay, this is what happens next. This information gets sent over to the host. Okay, and depending on how far away you are from the host, it's going to take some time for that information to get there. That's your ping. Okay, that's your ping to your host. And basically, I've just used the number here of 200, but that's quite exaggerated. It's usually not that high. But I'm just using that as a nice round number. So you send that information off to the host to say, hey, I shot the enemy. The host goes, okay, the host gets that message about 200 milliseconds later. The problem is, so it's 200 milliseconds. The problem is, in that 200 milliseconds, your little enemy guy has moved, perhaps left or right or forward or back or whatever. And so the host actually sees this on their screen. The host sees, obviously the host doesn't have their screen as such, but the host thinks that the enemy has moved. Okay, and so the enemy may not be in the center of the screen anymore when you shot. And so the host sees something like this, where your reticule's in the center, the enemy's off to the left or right, and you've missed the shot. So this is where lag compensation comes in. What happens is the host keeps track of basically everything that's happened in the last 1 second or so, which is 1,000 milliseconds. So it keeps track of everything that's happened in the last second, and it goes, oh, okay, this information took about 200 milliseconds to get to me. So I'll rewind the clock, so to speak, and look at where this enemy here was 200 milliseconds ago. And so what happens is it does that, and it gets something like this. It gets the enemy probably in the center, because that's where you saw it on your screen with your cursor, and it goes, oh, look at that. That's the same as that. Oh, well, I guess that means that you hit the enemy when you were targeting him and you shot. So now it sends that information back to you. And it says, yeah, you hit the enemy. That takes another 200 milliseconds to get to you. Okay. And it says, yeah, you hit the enemy, so you get a hit marker. And that's after 200 milliseconds plus the other 200 milliseconds. That's how long it takes for you to start to get that hit marker. So it's a total of 400 milliseconds. Not 200, but 400, because you got to send the information both ways. And so then after 400 milliseconds, you get that hit marker and the enemy gets hit. And so on and so forth. And that happens for everyone in the match. And that's basically what lag compensation is. Now, as I've said, if you don't have lag compensation, this doesn't happen. And what you've got to do is you've got to predict where the enemy is. But that's another topic for another day. But basically, this is just showing you that lag compensation isn't the devil. It's not the cause for all your problems. And it's not something that can be tweaked. It either you either hit the enemy or you don't. It's something that they put in the game. The lag compensation figures out how far away the enemy was based on your ping to the host, and then it determines whether or not you hit the enemy, and it sends that information back. And that's it. It's literally that simple. All right, guys. So now that we know what lag compensation actually is, and we know that it's not evil or bad or anything like that, and it's not the cause for all of our problems, what is the cause for all of our problems? Well, the cause is distance. That's the problem. And I'm going to look today or now at the effect that distance has on your internet connection when you're playing online games. So I said before in my previous example that if you have, you're over here and the host is over there, and you hit someone, you need to send that information off to the host, and the host will then check it using lag compensation and determine, whether or not, you actually hit the enemy on their host screen. And then they say, yes, you did. And so then they send that information back. And then you start getting a hit marker. So, like I said, I used in the previous example, 200 milliseconds for the information to get sent either way, which means that, the time it takes to get a hit marker is going to be 200 plus 200, which is going to equal to 400 milliseconds, which is quite a lot. And thankfully, that's not actually the case, unless you usually have a 1 bar connection or something like that. If it's an Australian player playing in a European or an American lobby, then, you'll get upwards of 400. 400 will actually be quite good. You're more likely to get something like 800, which is really, really bad. You don't want that. But in general, you're not going to get numbers that high if you're playing with people from the same country as you. Now, what happens though if, like I said, I want to look at the effect that distance has on the connection. So let's say that now, instead of you being really, really far away from the host, let's say you're, a bit closer. So if you're from here to here, so this is you, and, then the host sends that information back, then, now instead of 200 milliseconds either way, it's probably going to be 100 milliseconds, because you can see that it's, about halfway. It's obviously not drawn to scale, but in general, it's going to be 100 milliseconds either way, in which case now it's 100 milliseconds to send the information plus 100 milliseconds to receive the information. And so instead of our 400, we now have only 200 milliseconds. So in other words, our connection is twice as good. In other words, we're going to get hit markers much sooner, or half the time as what we would have had before. So that's the effect that distance has. If you're the host, well, we know that the host has pretty much a perfect connection. And so what happens is, the reason we have a perfect connection if you're the actual host, basically, we see here that as we move this location closer and closer to the host, then we get a smaller and smaller amount of time. Here's maybe 50, and then if we change that to here, we get 25 and so on, until we actually become the host. If we're the actual host itself, well, then there is nobody to send that information to. There's no one here. And there's no one to receive that information back from, because we are the host. We're the actual host ourselves, in which case that information doesn't have to get sent and received. In other words, basically, if you're a host, you're going to have the perfect connection, because if you hit someone or not. You don't have to send that information off to get it verified and then get that information back before you can get that hit marker. You're going to get it straight away as soon as you hit the enemy. So we can see here that as we decrease the distance, from the host, we get a better and better and better and better connection. So what does that mean? Well, in the context of Australia, which is where I'm from, this is what it means. Let's have a quick look at the population distribution of Australia. If you look at Australia, basically you've got all the major cities kind of on the east coast here. You've got one here and one up here somewhere, but nobody really cares about that one. Sorry for all you people over in Darwin. But generally, if you look at the population distribution, we have something like 2 million people here, and we have about 20 million people here. And what this means is that pretty much any time there's an online game or something, in general, like 9 out of 10 times, there's going to be the host somewhere in this region. Okay, that's pretty much what it means. And like I said, 1 out of 10 times you'll get a host maybe here somewhere. But it pretty much quickly switches back to someone in this 20 million area, because that's where most people are. And there's a more higher chance of the host getting chosen in that region. So if you're from Perth, what does this mean? Well, we found out earlier that the closer you are to the host, the better connection you're going to have, and the sooner you're going to get hit markers. So let's look at the best case scenario. Let's look at the scenario where you're using a sniper rifle. Let's say you're a player. Let's say the host is located right here in Sydney. And let's say you're a player that's located here in Brisbane, and you're using a sniper rifle to kill an enemy. Well, you see an enemy on your screen and you shoot him. That information you send off to the host, and that takes, let's say, 30 milliseconds. Okay? Now, the host has a look and checks it and says, yeah, I think that's pretty much accurate based on my records. So I sends the information back and says, yeah, you get a hit marker. That information takes another 30 milliseconds. So this person over in Brisbane gets a hit marker after 30 plus 30 or 60 milliseconds, in which case after 60 milliseconds, he shoots that enemy with his sniper rifle and that enemy dies, gets a one hit, one kill. Awesome, 60 milliseconds. Now let's have a look. What if the other person that he was shooting at, let's say this guy in Brisbane was shooting at someone over in Perth. Okay, so this guy all the way over in Perth was the other guy, and he was also shooting back with a sniper rifle. So in other words, they were having a 1v1 with a sniper rifle to see who wins. Well, unfortunately, the guy over in Perth is at a huge disadvantage because he has to travel a further distance to get that information over to the host. And that takes maybe, let's say, 140 milliseconds. Okay, and then that information has to get verified, of course, and then that information gets sent back, and that takes another 140 milliseconds. So the poor old guy in Perth doesn't know and doesn't get his hit marker on the enemy for 140 plus 140. Hope you guys can see this. If you can't, I'll just change the color now. So we get 140 plus 140 or 280 milliseconds. So this poor guy over in Perth, he's fighting this guy over in Brisbane, and he goes, oh yeah, I'm going to kill this guy with my sniper rifle. One shot, one kill. Unfortunately, he dies straight away. And he doesn't understand because he shot and he didn't get a hit marker, but he died. And the reason for that is literally because of his distance from the host. Because the guy over here in Brisbane is so much closer to the guy over here in Sydney who's hosting the match, he gets a hit marker so much quicker, in which case the guy over in Perth dies rather than the guy over in Brisbane. So in other words, the guy over in Perth has to react so much faster than someone that's closer to the host, like in Brisbane, Melbourne, Canberra, or Hobart, for example, or even Adelaide, because he's so far away. So in other words, he's at a huge disadvantage, and he's pretty much always going to have a 3-bar connection. And in fact, I live over in Perth, and pretty much whenever there's a host in any of these areas over here, one of these areas over here, I've always got a 3-bar connection, in which case I'm always at a huge disadvantage because that distance to one of those hosts is so much more than what anyone else in that same area has basically. So just quickly wrapping up, how does this relate to people over in America? Well, it's kind of the same sort of deal. If you look at the distances here, the distance between Perth and Sydney is something like 3,300 kilometers. It's kind of like imagining yourself, if you're over in Los Angeles or in New York, it's like playing against someone across the other side of the country. And pretty much all the time, that's how my connections are whenever I play Black Ops or Black Ops 2 or Modern Warfare 3. That's the kind of stuff I have to deal with. It's like always playing with those people. And if you've ever played against someone across the other side of the country in the US, you'd know what I'm talking about when I say and when I complain about having such a bad connection all the time. Anyway, guys, I hope you found it informative. At least now you understand why I complain a bit. And now you kind of know how lag compensation works and why distance is so important from the host. Hope you enjoyed the video. If it helped you out, as usual, leave a like and have a nice day.